Welcome to the Record Celtic podcast. My name is Daniel Combe. Delighted as ever to be joined by Record Sports' very own Ryan McDonald. Ryan, how's it going?
Yeah, not bad, Dan. How's yourself, mate?
I can't complain. I've not been on the Celtic pod for a couple of weeks, but I'm delighted to be called up again today. Although, not an amazing weekend for Celtic, it has to be said. The 0-0 draw with Hibs at Celtic Park. You were obviously in Belgrade last week and for the game, and I actually thought, particularly in the second half, maybe this kind of new look Celtic team had cracked it a wee bit going forward. But it was kind of back to normal again at the weekend, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think Celtic bossed the game at the weekend. You know, if you look at the stats and the figures and so on, I think Celtic had like something like 77% possession. So that shows you how much of the ball they had. They had 26 shots at target, 26 shots at goal compared to Hibs' 4 efforts at goal. Problem being, Celtic only had 6 shots on target. And I think that's been their issue all season. The lack of real potency up front. I think Kelechi Iheanacho has certainly made a difference since he's come in. Obviously, 2 goals in 4 games. It's a good start. But, you know, I think clearly there's an issue up front at the minute. They're definitely not firing all cylinders. And I think it's down to Brendan Rodgers to work out a solution for that. But yeah, I think overall, if you look at the game and you take the emotion out of it on Saturday, I think Celtic actually played okay. But yeah, again, it just comes up to that lack of, proficiency up front.
I mean, just to put it into context, last season, after 11 games, we're 11 games in now, Celtic had scored 36 goals. This season, 17. So a 19-goal drop-off, which, look, is going, I mean, we're stating the obvious, but it's going to happen when you sell players like, Kuhn and what, you sell these players and don't replace them with adequate replacements. It's going to happen, I guess.
Yeah, and again, I suppose it's a slightly new team as well. You've obviously got Seb Tineke. You could essentially have an entirely different front line if you were to play Tineke on the left, Iheanacho through the middle, and then Balacquisha on the right, for example. Obviously, the Balacquisha experiment hasn't quite worked yet. But yeah, I mean, I think Celtic they're just building the chemistry at the minute. I think actually down the left-hand side, Tierney was obviously given the rest of the weekend, but I'm sure we'll maybe come on to this, Dan. But I think Saracchi at left back was a standout for Celtic.
Yep.
I think they're building something decent down that left-hand side with him and Tineke. Obviously, Kieran Tierney will be the first choice left back, but yeah, I was really impressed with him at the weekend. He smashed the bar as well, crossbar as well. He's got a cracking left foot. And, he floated in some dangerous crosses as well. So I think that was really encouraging at the weekend. And yeah, it's down to kind of Kieran Tierney to reach those levels as well. Obviously, KT he's only managed to play 90 minutes once this season. I think we can all agree that he's not hit the heights that maybe everyone expected. So to have a guy like that in reserve and kind of pushing Tierney for his jersey is great news for Celtic and Brendan Rodgers.
No, I agree. I thought Saracchi was probably the standout player, as you say, for Celtic at the weekend. Look, I'm a wee bit concerned about Tierney. I don't know if you share these concerns that he's not even 28 yet. He's still got time on his side, obviously, but I feel like it's taken him a little longer than I thought it would to kind of hit his top level.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Celtic fans will just remember the Kieran Tierney of old before with Kieran Tierney that earned that £25 million move to Arsenal, and was it 2019?
Yep.
And he was sensational. He was a fan's favourite. He totally warranted that move. And just unfortunately, injuries have caught up with him. So obviously, it's down to Celtic to manage that, and they'll be fully aware of Kieran Tierney's fitness and injury record in recent years. And I think it's just a case of gradually building him up. I don't think many people would have expected Tierney to hit the ground running right away, considering he hasn't played week in, week out for so many years. So, and obviously, he does suffer niggling injuries here and there. So I think it's a case of just gradually building him back up and getting him back to the levels which we all know he can reach. And if Celtic can get that, then yeah. I mean, they've got an absolute top draw left back in their hands. And I do think he will get to that level. I really do. But it's just a case of giving him time. I think if you as long as he stays injury free, if you're to compare the Kieran Tierney that we're seeing now to the Kieran Tierney we're maybe going to see around March, April time, I think it'll be night and day.
I hope you're right. I do hope you're right. And I do look, I agree with you. I do agree with you. I don't see anything that makes me think, he's never going to quite back to his best. It's just that almost that explosiveness that he's not quite get back. Although, having said that, I mean, the game in Belgrade, he pulled back. I don't know if you remember the pullback for Negren in the second half. I thought it was such a clever bit of football. It just showed that he's not all about pace and power. He's actually a really clever footballer.
Yeah, and that's definitely one of Kieran Tierney's greatest weapons is the fact that his crossing's exceptional, and that's where he really gives something down that left hand side. Obviously, Greg Taylor, who played the inverted role, Tierney's more a traditional overlapping fullback. Loves to bomb forward, hit the byline, then cut it back for Negan, like you say, or fire a high ball into the box. So I think Celtic really benefit from that this season. But yeah, it's just a case for me. It's just a case of giving him time and getting him kind of fully up and running.
You mentioned Balacquisha a couple of minutes ago, and we will talk about him, and we have to talk about Daizen Maeda as well. But before we do that, I'll try and squeeze in another positive as I see it, and that revolves around Liam Scales, because I don't know what you think, but I thought he was outstanding again at the weekend. I thought he was absolutely brilliant in Belgrade. Thought he was top notch. And look, it's very early days, of course, but if you're putting a gun to my head, I would say he's probably Celtic's player of the season so far.
Yeah, and do you know something, Dan? I'm delighted you've actually raised the point about Liam Scales, because I think every team in football is always going to have a scapegoat. They're always going to be a whipping boy. And at the minute, I think Liam Scales, for whatever reason, finds himself as a Celtic whipping boy.
Yep.
He's not everybody's favourite. He's always the one when you look at the team and where there could be upgrades. It's always Liam Scales that's picked out. But he has been outstanding this season, and he seems to have really formed a solid partnership at the back with Cameron Carter-Vickers. I think Celtic have only conceded one league goal. I think it was away to Kilmarnock this season. So that shows you that, defensively, Celtic they're solid. They're absolutely middle to front's the problem. I think the issue with Liam Scales is he's not a sexy name. All right, he's not a sexy name on paper. If he was an Italian, then the fans would love him. I also think he's probably his biggest weakness is his distribution. I think he can be really sloppy with the ball at times, and that does let him down. Mm-hmm. He can put Celtic under pressure with some kind of wayward passing. I do think he struggles to break the lines at times as well. But if you're to assess his performance on a purely defensive level, I mean, he's been top draw this season, and like you say, we're not going to be casting our votes for Player of the Year at this stage. But to base it, if you look at kind of Player of the Month, for example, then I think Liam Scales has got to be in the reckoning. And obviously Brendan Rodgers has stuck by him. Maybe eyebrows were raised at the start of the season when Liam Scales was pitched in against St Mirren for Flag Day. Yep. Obviously, Austin Trusty, you might recall, Dan, he had a really impressive pre-season. He was excellent, actually. And you had the feeling that, this is the player that Celtic have spent £6 million for. And you'd have thought it would have been Trusty and Carter-Vickers who would have kind of kicked off the season. Mm-hmm. There might be reasons for that. I know Austin Trusty's got an issue with his foot, which fingers crossed he'll be back in the match day squad and in training over the coming weeks. But yeah, obviously Scales has the trust of the manager, and he's hardly really put a foot wrong defensively. I mean, even remember that game at Ibrox in the 0-0 game. The amount of headers, he always seems to be in the right position at the right time.
Yeah.
The amount of headers, the amount of clearances, the amount of blocks, he really put his body on the line, and he's been like that every single game. So yeah, I think Liam Scales deserves all the credit in the world, and he's certainly not to let himself or Celtic down this season.
I think you've hit the nail on the head when you say that it's just not a sexy name, and I would even take it further and say that it's because this guy he was on loan at Aberdeen, and even when he broke into the Celtic team, he was on the cusp of going to Aberdeen and loan again. I think I'm right in saying he brought in. But I was watching the other night against Belgrade, and I was thinking, like you said, if Celtic had paid £8 million for Liam Scales, and he was from, I don't know, Finland, as you say, Italy or whatever, people would be raving about him. People would be absolutely raving about him. Like you say, his anticipation, the blocks he puts in, the headers. I felt it was important to vocalise that because, as you say, he's been a bit of the whipping boy, and I don't really get it. Like, I can understand maybe at times last season, as you say, he gave the ball away a bit easily.
Yeah.
Surely any Scales haters out there are gone now. I guess maybe people listening can give us some feedback if we're going over the top a wee bit, but who knows? The other one I mentioned, obviously, Balacquisha, £5 million. What's your take on him so far, Ryan? I know he's not had much time in the first team really yet, but he's not really set the header out, has he?
That's putting it politely, Dan. It's a real head scratcher, this one, because I mean Celtic I've been tracking this lad for more than 12 months. We know that. He obviously had his injury issues around about winter time, which was why a move to Celtic didn't transpire in January. They waited until August to finally land him, and it doesn't really seem the right fit at the minute. It's far too early to judge him, right? Too early to judge him. For me, a player needs at least 10 starts before there can be any snap judgments made. So I'm reluctant to go hard on him, but on the early kind of cameos which we have witnessed, it's not been great. I think his debut at Ibrox, it's hard. You're thrown into a baptism of fire at Ibrox against two. You can never judge a player on that, but he was up against a 33-year-old James Tavernier at right back, and if there's one player you want to be up against, it's Tavernier. Because we all know his fragilities defensively. And Balacquisha just seems so reluctant to drive forward or get past him. He just seemed to revert back and take the easy pass. And that was, again, the case in his subsequent appearances as well. He came off the bench again against Hibs at the weekend, and he just never looked like making any sort of impact whatsoever. I know it's kind of hard to judge him because Brendan Rodgers has acknowledged this as well. As a result of kind of Celtic's chaotic window, shall we say, they are short at right wing, and Balacquisha has been forced to kind of play in that role because of Seb Konecki's outstanding start. So I think if he gets a run of games in his favourite position on the left-hand side, then we'll really discover what type of player he is. Obviously, like everyone else, you'll have watched the highlights reel of his time in Belgium. We've obviously spoken to a couple of journalists over there as well, and I know he was really highly regarded over there. And Celtic were able to get him for around £5 million because he was kind of entering the final year of his contract. So on paper, it looked good business. But for me, warning signs always come out. And I know it's easy to say this now because he's not got off to a great start. But I did think at the time, when it emerges that, Celtic need to fly over to Belgium to convince a player to sign for them. For me, the warning signals are out. I always remember the fiasco with Stefan Skepovic. 1 minute he was signing, the next day wasn't. Celtic had to convince him to sign. He joins, and then his move turns out to be a disaster. Kind of, whenever I hear stories like that, it always reminds me of Stefan Skepovic. Hopefully, Balacquisha will be a success at Celtic, and he'll prove a lot of the fans wrong after a kind of shaky start. But yeah, it's early days. It's too hard we can't make any snap judgments. But he certainly has a lot to prove, and you'll need to make huge improvements if he's to dislodge Seb Konecki from that left-hand side. The right-hand side is a massive problem for Celtic. You've only got James Forrest and Yang, your natural wingers out there. Obviously, Daizen Maeda was shifted out there against Hibs at the weekend. Doesn't really look comfortable in that position. So there's an imbalance there. And I think, unfortunately for Balacquisha, he's found himself as a victim of it.
Well, I mean, on Balacquisha, I think I can't argue with anything you say. I think it's far too early to cast judgment on him. However, you know the thing you said there about him having to be convinced to sign for Celtic. I agree with you. That's what I mean. Why should you be, with all due respect to the club he was at, convinced to come and play for Celtic? That stood out to me as well. And I say that because it almost looks to me in his early appearances that he doesn't particularly want to be there. And now, look, that could be completely unfair. That might just be his style of play. And I would also throw in, I kind of thought similar about Nicholas Kuhn when he came. Nicholas Kuhn, I thought to myself,
Exactly.
I don't see it. I don't really see it. We know he had the dental problems, didn't he? But it's just difficult with Balacquisha because his body language, he just doesn't look like he almost looks like he's been forced into this move a wee bit.
Yeah,
And that might be totally unfair, but that's just the early indications or the early feelings on it, I guess.
Yeah, his body language is a wee bit of a concern for me, if I'm being honest. I mean, I saw him, it was in the dying minutes against Hibs at the weekend, and he was going over to help with a corner kick, and he was just kind of strolling over. It just, at that point, the fans are roaring to get behind the team, rolling them on to get that winner. But Balacquisha just seemed to be in the wrong movie at the weekend. And again, he's only come off the bench. I get it. I'm not going to be too harsh on him, but yeah, it's early days. We'll just need to wait and see how he progresses. As I say, he's not got off to a great start. It hasn't helped his handling. Obviously, he's been forced out to play out of position. He's not really had a run of games yet, or as of yet. So once he does get a run of games, once he does play in his favourite position, then I think we'll be in a better position to cast judgment.
And believe me, there's nothing I like more than to see Balacquisha make my words. But fingers crossed he does in the coming weeks and months. We mentioned Daizen Maeda a couple of times, but I think we should round off the game at the weekend by mentioning him, Ryan. You mentioned it yourself. I don't think he looked comfortable on the right-hand side. And it's a weird one with Maeda because everything that's come out about his failed move away and what have you, he's obviously, his head's going to be down about that. He's only human. You can see that he's still trying. You can see that he's still putting it in. He's sprinting. And as I say, he's really putting work in for the team. But again, you can also see that maybe his heart's just not quite in it. And it does make me wonder if we're ever really going to see last season's Daizen Maeda ever again.
This is the thing, Dan, because, I mean, for the benefit of hindsight, I think we were on this podcast at the start of the season saying it would be unthinkable for Celtic to sell Daizen Maeda.
That's right.
That was based on his form that made him Scotland's Player of the Year last season.
Yeah.
You look at the form just now, you obviously factor in, his probably personal heartache had been told, or maybe given assurances that he would be sold this summer. And I think, he even packed his bags in deadline day expecting to be moved after agreeing a transfer elsewhere, only for it to fall through because Celtic hadn't had any replacements lined up for him. So, I think he's 27, he'll be turning 28 soon. Mm-hmm. He's at that stage of his career. He's come from Japan. He's had, 3 or 4 laps of the SPFL now. I think that's more than enough from a player that has given his all to Celtic, that has no allegiances to Celtic whatsoever. He's came from the other side of the world. He'll have his own burning ambitions to play at a higher level. And, I think this summer was probably the time, with the benefit of hindsight, to sell him as long as Celtic had the replacement lined up. But unfortunately, they didn't. And now they find themselves, and Brendan Rodgers finds himself in a kind of challenging position at the minute, trying to inspire, trying to motivate Daizen Maeda to recapture that form that, that was, as we said, saw him crowned Scotland's Player of the Year last season, 33 goals. I've always said it, Dan, and I said it in this podcast earlier in the summer as well. I've never thought that Daizen Maeda was ever going to be Celtic's first choice striker. I don't think he's a natural goal scorer. I know he hit 33 goals last season, but I think that really was a purple patch. I know he's obviously represented his country up front as well, but he's far too inconsistent in front of goal for me. We all know the opportunities that he's missed recently. We stretch it back to last season. That chance at Ibrox, the Scottish Cup final. He had the 2 chances against Kerry Almaty this season. So yeah, he's spurned a lot of opportunities up front, and I think Celtic need to have Celtic need a more clinical striker and composed striker up front, and you've seen the difference that Iheanacho has made right away. And I think that's the type of player that Celtic have been craving. Daizen Maeda, for me, his best position is the left-hand side, but as we've already discussed, Celtic are lopsided now on the left-hand side. We've got so many options, but not enough on the right. So it's an interesting one. I think if he carries on his current form, then I think Brendan Rodgers could have a decision to make. It's unthinkable to say that, he might consider dropping Daizen Maeda, but, for always running, for always effort, if he's not showing that quality in front of goal or the quality in terms of creating assists, then, Celtic, I'm afraid, have better options.
Yeah.
And, it's in terms of Daizen Maeda as well, this is a guy who will be striving to secure his place in the Japan squad for the World Cup next summer. He's also, as well, unless he's been given guarantees that a club is going to definitely come back in for him in January, he's also still got to put in the performances to warrant this big money move that he obviously wants.
Absolutely.
So, there's a lot for him to prove between now and January as well. So, we're just approaching the end of September, so it's nearly been, it's been 3 or 4 weeks now since Daizen's, learned his fate. So he really needs to get over it. He needs to get back to his best form, and between now and January, let's see what happens.
Aye, absolutely. Coming up for Celtic then to round off today's podcast, Braga on Thursday night in the Europa League. Braga, we've got a story today on Record Sport Online about their stuttering start to the season. They lost 1-0 at home to Nacional yesterday. They've only won 2 of their opening 7 league games in Portugal this season. You would think Celtic at home, under the disco lights, the floodlights on a Thursday night, this is a game that Celtic really should be winning. And if they do win it, they put themselves in a really good position after the opening 2 games.
Yeah, it was definitely a credible point over in Belgrade. It wasn't it was far from a full house in Belgrade, but the ultras behind that goal, I tell you what, they created some noise. Mm-hmm. So to emerge from there with a point in opening day, I felt was great for Celtic. You definitely have taken that beforehand. Obviously, approaching this one, you've got back-to-back home games now. So the first one, obviously, against Braga, and then the next one will be against Sturmgras. So yeah, I think Celtic really should be looking to take all 3 points here. And really, set a marker. And the Europa League, they really need to start. They'll have the ambitions of climbing up that table and hopefully qualifying directly for the last 16. I think you need to qualify. You need to be in the top 8 for that.
Yeah.
Or at the very least, obviously in the top 24 to qualify for the knockouts, just like they did in the Champions League. So, yeah, I think 2 back-to-back home games gives Celtic an opportunity to really get points on the board. Braga, as you say, they're struggling domestically, but I think they did beat Feyenoord.
They beat Feyenoord 1-0 in their opening Europa game, aye.
Yeah, so obviously that's a great result for them. There'll be a familiar name coming back to Celtic Park as well. Obviously, there's Gustav Lagerbielke playing for them,
aye.
And I think he's been a regular starter for them this season as well. So, with all due respect, I know they're obviously a Portuguese team and they'll definitely pose a bigger threat than probably most or just about every team Celtic have encountered in Scotland this season. But on home grounds, Celtic should be winning this one, and we'll see what happens.
Especially with Roma coming up as well, you would think Braga and Sturm Graz at home almost must-win games, really. I know it's early to be saying must-win. On the TV the other night, obviously you were at the game in Belgrade, but on the TV, the big build-up was all about Seville and showing clips of the run to Seville and can Celtic do it this season? I would counter that by saying, look, they just need to make sure they get to the knockout stages. The way things are going just now, just make sure you're in, as you say, at the very least, the top 24.
Yeah, it would be a catastrophe if Celtic were to reach the knockout stages at the very least. We've said it before, but there was a period in time last season where Celtic fans were saying, they wouldn't actually mind a crack at the Europa League for a change to follow Rangers' success and go deep in the competition. So this is an opportunity to do it. And if you look at the Europa League table, there aren't really that many formidable teams that Celtic should fear, if any, at all.
Yeah.
So, I think Celtic do have an opportunity here. The problem is they've had 4 0-0s this season. They've drawn a blank 4 times this season, and I think about 11 games. So clearly, as we discussed at the start of the podcast, putting the ball in the back of the net is the biggest issue at the minute. Keeping it out at the other end hasn't been a problem. So if Celtic can just start clicking middle to front, and obviously Ian Achilles, as he builds up his match fitness, starts to build a bit of confidence, scores some more goals, then you'd like to think as the weeks and months progress that Celtic will be getting better and better, start to find their rhythm, start to find momentum, and really rack up the points in Europa League and make a real good fist of it.
And dare I say, maybe even a signing or 2 in January that could help along the way, but I'm not going to open that can of worms for now.
Oh, no. We'll just finish with the summer window. Let's not talk about January yet.
Aye, absolutely. Braga at home then, and then of course it's Motherwell at home. On this coming Sunday. I probably won't have the time. Oh, well, we won't have another Celtic pod between now and those games. So very quickly before we finish, Ryan, what's your predictions for both games?
Yeah, I mean, I do think, for all Celtic should be winning against Braga midweek. You've got to factor in this silent protest, which is going to be happening again. That's not going to do the team any favours. I get and understand the fans' frustration and the fact that they need to make a point and want to make a point to the board. 20 minutes of silence at Celtic Park in Europe on a European night, it's certainly going to be different. So it's down to the players to create that energy on the park. And yeah, obviously Brendan Rodgers will be hoping that they'll get over the line. I think it being an early kickoff, 5:45, I'm not expecting a sellout crowd or anywhere near it.
No.
On Thursday. So that's another issue they've got to contend with. I think if Celtic get around 40,000 fans, then I think that'll be a win. So yeah, I think it's a hard one. I think it'll be a close. I think it'll be a close encounter. I would fancy Celtic to nick it by a goal, and I think it maybe. I'll say 1-0. I'll say 1-0, and I think Ian Achilles might be the goal scorer again.
I've written down 1-0 for both games. The game is against Motherwell as well. So,
yeah. Well, that's the thing. I mean, that's the thing, Dan, because you need to be wary of this European hangover. It's been a long time since Celtic have played Thursday to Sunday football.
Yep.
They've had the luxury of playing Tuesday to Wednesday, and then maybe Tuesday or Wednesday to Saturday or Sunday. But now that there is aside from the international break, Celtic are playing every two or three games a week, every midweek between now and Christmas. So it's going to be a really hectic run of fixtures, and they talk about the midfield issues at the minute. Arnie Engels, Paulo Bernardo, Luke McCowan can't really get a look in at the minute, but I think they'll certainly be utilised over the coming weeks. And yes, Celtic they've got to make sure that there's no European hangover on Sunday as well. They can't afford to drop more points
against a good Motherwell team.
Exactly, and that's the thing. Motherwell have made a cracking start. I don't think they're going to be sitting in either. I think they'll have to make a real go of it.
You fancy their chances,
They'll certainly fancy their chances. So, yeah, it's all set up for 2 entertaining games, I think, over the coming days. But yeah, obviously, as I say, in terms of domestic duties, Celtic have dropped 4 points so far this season already. They can't afford to drop more points at home to Motherwell. And, obviously Hearts play Hibs on the Saturday night as well, Ned and Derby, which should be an absolute cracker.
Yeah.
And obviously Rangers will be in action in the Sunday as well. So, yeah, Celtic want to keep a minimum of 7 points ahead of Rangers, and clearly they'll hope to trim the gap on Hearts and restore the lead at the top of the table.
Absolutely. And whatever happens, we'll be here to pour over it all on the Record Celtic podcast. But for now, Ryan, I think it's always a pleasure.
Yeah, enjoyed that, mate. Welcome back.
Thank you very much. We'll be back, as I say, with another Record Celtic podcast next week, and we really hope you can join us then. Thanks for listening.